Welcome to a new episode of MetaWell, where we consider all things related to well-being. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about social well-being. My first question for you, and I think we touched on this a tiny bit in the previous episode, but why does social well-being matter? Why should we even consider it?
These components of yourself and of your life they can't really stand alone. Your well-being matters because it influences other areas of your life and is also an essential component to your health in and of itself. It feels like maybe there's something more negotiable about it, but same way that you wouldn't assume you can go without eating, you can't really go without having some kind of social connection, social role, and upkeep of social engagement in some kind of capacity.
I agree with you. And I really like the connection that you made to food in some sense. Like you can go for a while without food, but at some point you got to get some food in you. You can go for a while without social connections, but at some point you got to have some social connections. But I guess that begs a couple of questions as to why. Why do you need social connections? Some people consider themselves introverts, and I don't really need that. Then the follow-up part of that is, well, what happens if you don't? What if I don't get food, I die. If I don't get social connection, do I die?
If you're living totally on your own with no connection to anyone, the odds are things aren't looking great for you, I guess. But the question is why? Why do we need social connection?
Yeah, like why do what happens if I don't get social connection? Like, can't I just be a loner all by myself and be perfectly satisfied?
I think we've referenced in other episodes how, if these are pillars or walls of a structure, these are important pieces to something, and you start taking pieces down, start taking away some of the pillars, things are going to fall. Like the structure is relying on this whole thing to be held up. So you take away one of the main pillars, social connection, I think you can assume that your well-being in general will start to deteriorate. I imagine it wouldn't be long before just a sense of meaning and belonging starts to disappear if you find yourself without any social connection at all. And so now your mental health is at stake, I think, very quickly. And it's not too long behind mental health goes that your physical well-being goes. You probably don't feel like eating. You're not getting as good as sleep. Do you have the motivation to do the things that are physically required of you? Once that goes as well, are you working? Are you able to make income? Your finances are probably not too far behind as well. So, I don't know if it's an instant all of these things collapse, but I do know that you pull one of these down and the whole structure is at risk of collapsing.
I think one of the things that you remind me of that I think is really important here is there's this kind of like delicate balance of autonomy, of being able to like make decisions on my own, being able to have some independence and freedom and all of those kinds of things. But there's also there's something that I get from community. There's something that I get from connection with others. There's like this, I guess if I had to boil it down, there's love, there's care, there's compassion, there's understanding, I get all of these things. And I think one of the things that's really important about that is that we as humans have really grown up to be relational beings. That's how we find meaning. I look at other people around me and I say, what are most people doing? How does that fit with what I want to do or with how I feel like I belong? And so there's this like bouncing off of other people, the like just for like who am I? Where do I fit? How do I belong? But also we have become such a culture, a society, a group of people that we really are interconnected to each other. I'm wearing a shirt. I didn't raise any cotton for this shirt. I didn't manufacture the shirt. I didn't do anything except for go to the store and interact with a clerk to buy this shirt. So I am completely dependent in that regard on other people's skills, on other people's abilities. But then I have other skills, other abilities that then I can contribute to society as a whole. That when other people need emotional support or psychological support, I'm a person that they can come to and rely on. And so I think that we have this interdependence now. And I think that's one of the things that has really helped us to change, to subsist. I don't have to spend all of my time hunting and gathering for food. I'm not completely dependent on myself for physical protection. People build our houses, and so that's the place where I can find refuge. If I was completely devoid of relationships, what life looked like would be really primitive because I only had time to take care of my basic needs. This interconnectedness has allowed me to kind of flourish in other ways where I get to entertain hobbies. I get to have more rest than I would have otherwise. I have a consistency of food. So I think just even at basic needs level, it shows that if I don't have meaningful connections with people, if I don't belong to a society, the quality of life just overall goes down.
I completely agree. I think it's kind of hard to escape the larger social contract, so to speak, that we're all kind of locked into, where we're in very literal terms dependent on each other. We're dependent on each other to fulfill whatever the roles are that they fulfill, and to do it with some amount of integrity, I guess, and consistency. That's just kind of in an economical sense, as you were talking about, like with products and services and things like that. But I think you could even apply that same kind of a system to social things, just expecting other people to engage and interact in certain ways and relying on them to be that. I need my neighbors to be reasonable and safe and consistent, and not just as a preference, but just as a like maintaining the stability of the neighborhood. And I could say the same about, the people in the city, in the state, in the country. We're all relying on each other for fulfilling what kind of seems like invisible roles, but roles that need to be present. They need to do certain things and be engaged in certain ways. And if they didn't, a lot to our societies would fall apart. On that same kind of social philosophical front, I don't want to butcher the quote, but Martin Luther King said something about like, we're all in interconnected mutual garment or something like that. Sounded a little better when he said it, but basically the same effect. And I think his aim in saying that was that I can't even allow other people to be treated and seen in a certain way. I can't be quiet or turn away or directly myself believe less than of someone else, and think that someone else is worth less than me or another group or something like that, because anything that is done to someone else is at risk of happening to me. If I say that there aren't these inalienable rights, that human beings don't have certain dignities and certain things that we should be afforded to everyone, then there's no reason that it can be afforded to me. Whatever reason you can come up with for taking it away from someone else means that it's acceptable for some reasons to take it away from you. And that could be, all kinds of things, all kinds of extremes of that. So I think, any way you slice it, we are very, very dependent on other people and each other. In this kind of philosophical vein, I have a question for you just about, it's kind of philosophical, so I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but maybe you have the right answer and you can put an end to it. Do you think that people are defined by their relationships? That we are who we are to other people, and that there's no really escaping that, which is kind of the underbelly of this. How do we live without social connection? But what's your take, Dr. Adam Froerer?
You only pull out my title when you're trying to be like, sarcastic a bit.
No, I'm being respectful.
Okay, okay, we'll see. I think your question is a good question. It's interesting because it actually reminds me of a theory, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but the theory is called self-determination theory. And this theory is created by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. And this theory, basically, they say there are three components for motivated, healthy, like happy people. There are three components that need to be present. And the first principle or concept is the idea of autonomy. That I have to feel like I am in control of my own actions, that I have to feel like I have an ability to make choices, that I'm not just being forced to do something, which sounds on the surface like, am I only defined by my relationships? It sounds like no. In fact, like one of these major things of like me being able to determine who I am, what I am, I have to have autonomy, and it can't really be based on anybody or anyone or anything else. It's based on my own determination. The second principle in this theory is this idea of competence. And the idea around competence is I have to be able to feel effective. I have to be able to feel capable. I have to feel like, in essence, I can follow through on my own autonomy. I choose this thing, and then I have the competence and the capability in order to follow through on what I choose. And so again, this second principle kind of puts us in the camp of like, I could do this by myself. I can be self-determined. And I think what's really interesting about this idea is that it's the third principle that kind of brings us back. And the third principle is this idea of what they called relatedness. And relatedness is the idea of how much I feel connected to or how much I feel valued by other people. And in some sense, what they're saying is if I have really meaningful connections and I have really useful social support, that actually allows me to exercise a bit more autonomy. That allows me to feel competent and capable and like I can make my own decisions. And so in this theory of like self-determination, on the surface it seems like I get to do it. I get to make the decisions. But I only get to do that when I feel connected, when I feel valued by other people. And so it kind of makes you wonder, like, well, why is relatedness important to self-determination? And I think it gets back to the question that you asked. This is a really long answer to your question, but I think it gets back to your question of like, can I only identify who I am based on who I am to other people? And I think in some sense that's true because I can identify as a partner, I can identify as a parent, I can identify as a child, I can identify as a sibling, I can, right? So much of like who I am is determined by who am I in relationship to other people that I'm with. And so I think that when I do that, when I consider who I am in relationship to other people, it also defines like what my role is, what the responsibilities are, what the expectations for behavior are. If I'm in the role of parent, then the role, the expectations, all of those things, they're very different than who I am as a partner, right? As a parent, it's my job to teach, it's my job to discipline, it's my job to raise them, take care of their needs, all of those kinds of things. But if it's a partner, some of those things come over. I am still maybe responsible to take care of their needs, but the way that I show love is different. The way that I relate, I don't need to discipline my partner. It's a different role. So who I am in relationship to you, it changes what is expected of me or what normal behavior is, what's considered functional, those kinds of things. And so I think to a large degree, it is like I can only be determined who I am based on who I'm related to. If you take that to a slightly bigger circle of people, right now we're getting into like my community. Who am I as a neighbor? Who am I as a faith group member? Who am I in a political party or political association or something like that? Again, knowing who I am in relationship to the group changes what my role is, changes what the expectations are, change. And so I think to a large extent, yes, we can identify who we are, but we oftentimes are identifying who we are in relationship to an individual, to a group, to a a societal norm. But does that mean that then I don't have personal identity? I don't think so. I think we can have certain things that we like, certain things that we don't like, certain foods that we enjoy. I think that there are times where we can sit with just our own thoughts, with just our own intentions, with our own goals, with what we want to achieve, who we want to become, how we want to like walk through the world. I think that that individual identity is oftentimes influenced by these societal norms or the expectations or right who I want to be as a person is going to be influenced by well I have kids, so I might prioritize who I want to be based on well is it going to negatively or positively impact these kids that I've got. And so I don't think it necessarily takes away an individual identity, but I think it influences an individual identity. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I can be individually defined, but I think it's really hard to separate from what roles do I play within groups beyond myself.
I think you did answer the question, and in fact, you answered a potential follow-up question
Oh,
as well.
good.
You got a 2 for 1 on that one. Don't think it's going to happen every time. And I really like your answer too, because it sounds like it's both, right? Like we're complex enough beings that yes, we are very defined by the relationships, who we are to other people and what that means, what those roles are and how that defines us. But also we are who we are based on our choices and how we react to things and what we make of stuff in those quieter moments just with ourselves. And so if someone was to ask, who am I? And I have to now tell them who I am and try to, really get the full essence of who I am and what defines me. There would probably be some kind of combination of that. It would definitely be speak of what are my roles to the people around me and how I serve the social systems that I belong to, family and community and all those things. But it would also include, the things that I think about myself and then what I make of things around me as well. So my own relating to things, not just how other people relate to me. Potential follow-up question that you kind of snuck your way into answering without even knowing the question, kind of the opposite, can you be defined without any relationships? And I think you kind of answered that, in saying that we kind of need both of these things, that you can't go without relationships. I guess that further emphasizes what you were saying, what you're asking about earlier. And what's interesting is what it brought to mind was human beings specifically are so social. We hear that all the time that we're social beings. But one of the most practical causes slash reasons for that is of all of the, animals and living things on the planet, we require one of the longest periods of care from, family in our development. There are animals who, as soon as they're born, they have a set of instincts and innate abilities that should carry them even in this, infant period. But they are good to go for the rest of their life. They might learn a couple things from their parents. Here's how we eat what we eat, or here's where we walk, some environmental things, but they are able to walk, they are able to eat, they are able to do the things that they need to do in order to survive. And should their parent, wander off like many animal parents do, they could very well be able to sustain themselves. Obviously, different species differ in lots of different ways. So there are species that the newborns are dependent on their parents, but not for 18 plus years, especially even in human infancy. That's like many years of being completely, unable to do things for yourself. You can't even move, not in an efficient way on your own. You can't barely bring food to your mouth, even if it was, in the same room as you until you're a few years old. That I feel like it's so obvious, it's so right in front of us, but we require so many years of being cared for and being I don't know where I heard this from, but it's a nice quote that I do like. Someone described it as like being loved into the moment that they're in. And without that, whatever sense of community or care or whoever takes care of them and has loved them, they wouldn't have gotten this far. I think everybody has that. For you to have gotten into whatever point in life that you're in, that required, at the very least, someone took care of the infant you, maybe to lots of different degrees of goodness. They did it. They could have been bad at it. They could have been good at it. Someone loved you and cared for you through your elementary years and into your adolescence and into your early adulthood. Odds are you found some kind of community, some kind of connection. You had relationships that kept you going into adulthood as well. I feel like that's just huge evidence of we can't do it alone because you literally physically wouldn't have survived. You wouldn't be able to get to the point that you're at if not a single soul, cared enough to engage with you on any level.
You reminded me actually of a different part about self-determination theory. One of the kind of implications of self-determination theory is this idea of like intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. Well, I guess before I go there, one of the things, as you were talking, one of the quotes that came to my mind is like all of these philosophers over time kind of struggling with like, can I exist on my own? Do I have to exist within a group? Way back, Descartes saying like, I think, therefore I am, right? And just this idea of like, because I think, that means I have an individual identity. Now, I think philosophers afterward came and, pushed back against that and said, well, like, who influences your thinking? Do you, when you're exposed to others, does that change your thinking? Does that impact your thinking? What I like about this self-determination theory is that ultimately they say we're trying to move toward this place of intrinsic motivation. I can motivate myself. I can make decisions that are good for me. I don't procrastinate because I can pull from something inside of me, some characteristic, some ability to like get myself moving. I don't need to depend on a parent or a teacher or a disciplinarian or whatever to like move me along. Ultimately, when I develop well, I develop into a place of intrinsic motivation. But one of the things that I think is really important and valuable about that is that they go back to those three original principles. And they say, in order to get to a place of intrinsic motivation, all three of those basic needs need to be met. You have to have autonomy. You have to be able to think on your own, act on your own. You have to have some competence. You have to be able to base it on, like, why am I making these decisions? But you also have to have this sense of relatedness, that I'm supported, that I'm backed up by other people. And I think that that's a really like nice balance that they strike of like ultimately I'm trying to make my own decisions. But when I feel supported, when I feel valued by people around me, I'm more able to do that. And so I think that that's an important kind of balance that we're trying to strike in this whole thing is ultimately, and when I look at my own well-being, having some autonomy, being able to make my own independent choices, those are good things. Those are things that I want that would define I'm in a place of wellness. I don't need to, I'm not crippled by decisions. I don't need to constantly be looking to somebody else to say, help me navigate this or help me know what the right way forward is. Ultimately, we want to get to a place where we can make those decisions on our own, where we can feel a sense of accomplishment or ability to move forward. But we're better able to do it when we feel supported by other people. And they, in self-determination theory, they did kind of draw on the work from attachment theory. And one of the things that I think is really valuable about this idea of attachment, that when we think of like, I have a secure attachment, it doesn't mean that I'm like bound to someone in a rigid way or an unhealthy way or whatever. It means that I feel supported enough by this connection that I can actually wander off a bit, that I can go and explore, that I can go and discover something new. And then when it feels a bit overwhelming or overstimulating, or I feel like, ooh, this is like unusual place I find myself in, I can come back over here and I can check and I can say, is my safety net still there? And then when I realize, oh, my safety net's still there, then I can get back to exploring and discovering and finding out new things. And so I think that's kind of an important distinction around this, like ultimately, to be well, I need to be able to choose for myself. But I need to be able to choose in a way that makes me still feel connected, to still makes me feel safe, still makes me feel a part of something. And when I feel that sense of security, then I have the ability to go a bit farther, push the limit a bit more, discover something that's undiscovered yet. And so I think that's where it's this nice balance of I'm not trying to be so connected that I can't explore, that I can't be self-determined, but I'm also not trying to be so independent that I have no need for a connection or relatedness. And so I think that in the end, wellness is a really, especially social wellness, is this really nice balance of I feel okay being me, but I also feel okay knowing that when I'm me, other people will accept me. Other people will support me. I don't have to be exactly like somebody else. But I know that they will value who I am because of my own autonomy, my own decision making. So I think that balance is a really important balance.
Yeah, it kind of makes the question of are you your own person or are you what you are to everyone else? You know, you are some, you know, just wrapped in your role to other people. It makes that question almost like irrelevant because it's like both at the same time and neither at the same time, and you can't really lose the balance of leaning too far onto one or the other. Almost in the same way that like you know Europeans met this other way of looking at ownership when they came to the Americas, Native Americans, and my most of my source material is Pocahontas, so I'm not a anthropologist on this specifically, but there's you know a completely different kind of balance and relationship that Native Americans had with the idea of ownership, and so Europeans would have this question of, do you own this land? Do we own this land? Who owns that over there? And from the other perspective, the Native American perspective, it's no one owns it. It kind of belongs to all of us and none of us at the same time. If you need something and it's available, you can use that thing. But also, we're supposed to be taking care of the land. We're supposed to be giving to the land as well. We're kind of in this harmonious loop of belonging to it and needing it, but also it needing us and it belonging to us, you know, in loose terms. And it sounds like that's where we are in our social connections with people too. We're not separate. We're not entirely them or in what we are to them. We are in this kind of like loose loop of needing them and needing to be needed and them needing us. And that intrinsically, like you were just describing, makes us better, makes us more healthier, makes us higher functioning. Yeah, it's a, I mean, thankfully, a great circle to be a part of because then it feels like you get going in the right direction and it starts to take care of itself.
Hmm. I also think, and maybe this is a place to maybe wrap up a bit, but I think it also that balance of us needing them, them needing us, it also eliminates like being taken advantage of, right? That that I should, regardless of what role I'm in, if I am the one giving love, care, connection, support, whatever, or if I'm in the role of taking care, taking connection, taking love, taking support, I have to be conscientious of. I can't give my all, or I end up being nothing. And I
Mhm.
also can't be taking all, or else again, like now I've just taken all of you. I'm not me. I haven't self-determined. I've taken, and so I think this is kind of a hard philosophical point to kind of wrap our heads around, but if I take advantage of someone else, or I allow someone else to take advantage of me, I have violated this balance of autonomy and relatedness. I have either stripped them of autonomy or they have stripped me of autonomy. And we're no longer, this concept of relatedness, we're no longer in balance. I'm not feeling supported. I'm not feeling loved. I'm not feeling, it's a taking too much of. And so I think that's also like in this idea of wellness, we absolutely need connection, but we also need to make sure I don't give too much of myself. I don't take too much of somebody else because if I do, I violate this idea of my own individuality within that or their individuality within that. So again, I don't know if I described that very well, but I think connectedness also says I can't give or take too much or there is no balance.
Yeah, I completely agree. There has to be a balance. So I feel like we really elevated the conversation from do we need connection and some of these more binary questions to striking down the middle of there's a balance here that we need.
Yeah. And I think that's an important principle of well-being is maybe this is all about finding a good balance, not being at the extremes of one or the other, but just trying to find that sweet spot where I can both give and receive. That seems like a place where we keep gravitating. Anything else that we need to touch on before I wrap it up here?
Not for me.
Okay. Well, hopefully that conversation about social well-being is helpful to you. Like always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. It's always nice to be able to get some feedback and to hear what you're thinking because that will then, again, I think in the vein of this conversation, it gives us an idea of like, are we moving in the right direction? Are we giving what people want? Are we producing something that people value? So please let us know. Let us know what you think. If you know of somebody else who would benefit from listening to all ideas about well-being, please feel free to share it with them. We would really appreciate it. In the meantime, go out and be well.